Most Americans think Australia will feel instantly familiar. Same language, same Western lifestyle, same media influences flowing back and forth across the Pacific for decades. You grow up watching Australian films, hearing Australian accents, absorbing the broad cultural signals. So when the flight lands and you step out into the air, you expect recognition. You expect it to feel like home with a different accent, but something feels slightly off almost immediately. Not dramatic, not hostile. Nothing you could point to and explain to someone who has not experienced it. Just different enough to create a low hum of uncertainty beneath your interactions. A sense that the rules you learned without knowing you were learning them do not quite apply here. And that quiet discomfort, that subtle gap between what you expected and what you are actually encountering, is where the real adjustment begins. Not at the airport, not in the obvious differences, but in the small moments when you respond the way you always have, and the room reacts in a way you did not anticipate. That is when you realize familiar and identical are not the same thing. One of the first genuine shocks is humor. Australian humor moves faster, runs drier, and leans heavily on sarcasm and irony. It does not wait for you to get comfortable before it starts. Teasing is common between strangers, between coworkers, between people who have just met. It can land before you have any context for it. In America, being teased by someone you barely know can feel pointed. It can read as dismissal or aggression, especially in professional or unfamiliar social settings where you are already trying to establish yourself. In Australia, teasing often signals the opposite. It means someone has decided you are worth engaging with. It means you have been led into the circle rather than excluded from it. But in the beginning, many Americans miss that entirely. The tone does not match the intent in any way their social wiring was prepared for. You hear the sharpness and brace for conflict that never arrives. The discomfort is real even though the threat is not. You are not being attacked. You are being included. And learning to feel the difference in real time is one of the first and most important recalibrations you will have to make. Then there is social tone, and this one catches many Americans off guard in a different way. Australians generally speak casually and directly in everyday life. There is less of the formal, layered politeness that Americans often use as social lubricant, especially in service environments. In America, customer-facing culture tends to be expressive and enthusiastic. Greetings are warm. Energy is performed. Staff are trained to project engagement and positivity in ways that have become deeply normalized. You absorb it so completely that you stop noticing it until it is gone. In Australia, the same interactions feel more relaxed and understated. A cashier may not perform enthusiasm. A server may be friendly without being effusive. The transaction happens without the emotional packaging Americans are used to receiving. And in the beginning, that absence can genuinely feel like coldness or indifference, even when it is neither. The person helping you is not dismissing you. They are simply not performing for you. Once you understand that distinction, the interactions start to feel refreshingly honest rather than lacking. But that shift in interpretation takes time and exposure to build. Public behavior is another layer of adjustment that takes longer to name because it lives in pace rather than words. Australians in daily life appear less hurried. There is less visible urgency moving through public spaces. Less of the tight, forward-leaning energy that Americans carry through airports, sidewalks, coffee lines, and work environments as a kind of default posture. In America, speed and visible efficiency have become proxies for seriousness. Moving fast signals that you matter, that your time is valuable, that you are someone with places to go. The culture rewards urgency and treats it as a form of competence. In Australia, calm pacing is simply normal. It does not signal laziness or disengagement. It signals that a person is comfortable in their environment. But if you arrive carrying American intensity, that low-grade forward momentum that never fully switches off, you may feel slightly out of sync with the rhythm of the spaces around you. Like you are moving at a different tempo than the room. Not wrong exactly, but noticeable. And that feeling of being slightly misaligned with the energy around you is its own quiet adjustment that no travel guide prepares you for. Social hierarchy also feels meaningfully different, and this is one of the adjustments that surprises Americans the most. In the United States, professional identity moves to the surface of conversations quickly. What you do for work often functions as a primary social coordinate. It signals income, education, ambition, and status in ways that shape how people engage with you almost immediately. It is so embedded in American social culture that many people do not realize how much weight they give it until they are somewhere that does not. In Australia, status signaling is noticeably toned down. There is a strong cultural current that runs against overt self-promotion or using professional achievement as social currency. People may genuinely not care what you do for work nearly as much as how you carry yourself, how you treat people, whether you are good company. For some Americans, this feels immediately refreshing, like a pressure they did not know they were holding finally releases. For others, it feels genuinely disorienting. The usual signals do not land the same way. The framework they use to establish themselves in a room stops functioning as expected, and recalibrating to a different social logic takes real time and self-awareness. There is also the directness, and this one operates differently from the humor. Australians may openly disagree with something you have said, offer a blunt observation, or push back on an idea without the emotional scaffolding that Americans typically build around those moments. In American communication, disagreement is often softened with qualifiers, cushioned with affirmations, wrapped in careful phrasing designed to protect the relationship while delivering the message. It is not dishonest. It is a learned social technology for managing friction in a culture where conflict can escalate quickly. In Australia, that same disagreement might come without the cushioning. Direct, clear, and moving on. No hostility intended, no relationship damage implied. Just an honest response delivered without ceremony. For Americans who are wired to interpret bluntness as a sign of tension or disrespect, this can create real momentary friction. Your system reads conflict where none exists. You spend energy managing a dynamic that the other person has already moved past. Recognizing that directness and aggression are not the same thing is one of the quieter but more valuable lessons the adjustment period teaches you. None of this means Australia is harder to live in, or better in some measurable way. It simply means that familiar does not always mean identical, and that gap between the two is where adjustment happens. For some Americans, the first few weeks feel like standing slightly off beat in a song you thought you knew. The melody is recognizable. The language is the same. The broad cultural landscape maps onto something you already understand. But the rhythm is just different enough that you keep stepping on the wrong beat and wondering why. The humor lands differently. The pacing throws you. The directness catches you unprepared. And none of it is hostile. That is the part that makes it genuinely confusing. There is nothing to push against. The discomfort does not have a clear target. But once you adjust to the humor, the pacing, the social tone, and the flattened hierarchy, the discomfort tends to dissolve into something closer to ease, often into something that feels like relief. The real question was never whether Australia is welcoming. It is. The real question is whether you are willing to recalibrate your expectations rather than waiting for the country to meet the ones you arrived with.